They say silence is golden. In my family, silence was the currency of deceit. It was the heavy blanket draped over the truth, and I was the one who had spent my whole life standing outside it, shivering. My name is Clara Vance, and if you'd met my family, the Vances of old Seattle money, you'd have seen the perfect, successful unit. The holiday card portrait. Mom in cashmere, Dad in a crisp suit. My older brother Leo, looking like the CEO he was, and me, always positioned slightly to the side, smiling too brightly. A portrait of stability. A lie. This year, Thanksgiving was held at the family estate in the San Juan Islands. A place of soaring ceilings and sweeping ocean views, a house built to convey permanence, legacy. I flew in from New York, not for the warmth of family, but for the cold necessity of ritual. I was seated at the far end of the long mahogany table. My mother, Eleanor, kept adjusting the silverware near my plate. My father, Robert, avoided my eyes, the way he always did when he was about to sign off on a decision that hurt me. And Leo? Leo was beaming. He stood up after the turkey was carved, a glass of fine single malt whiskey in his hand. He tapped it lightly with a silver spoon. The room, filled with aunts, uncles, and cousins, all the beneficiaries of my father's generosity, grew quiet. Thank you all for coming. Before we dig in, I have some news. This is a very special Thanksgiving. Mom and Dad, they've decided to formally transfer the deeds of this beautiful home, this estate, to me. It's official. The Vance legacy continues. The room exploded. They clapped, they whistled, they raised their glasses. Someone yelled, "A man of vision, just like your father." My mother dabbed her eye with a pristine linen napkin, as if she were overwhelmed with pride. I watched Leo take a long, triumphant sip of his whiskey. He caught my eye, and in that split second, his smile tightened into something sharp and ugly, a look that said, "You lose." I didn't clap. I didn't cheer. I simply set my knife down on the white tablecloth with a tiny, precise click. "Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the din of the celebration instantly. "Should I share the rest of the paperwork now, or do you want to hold off until dessert?" Leo froze, his glass halfway to his lips. My father's face, usually so composed, drained of all color, leaving him looking brittle and old. In that moment of perfect echoing silence, everyone knew the performance was over. Something colossal was about to hit. Before I take you into the storm that followed, let me ask you, where are you listening from tonight? It helps to know there are people out there who've navigated families that value image over integrity. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how my family's perfect picture finally shattered. The outsider. Families like mine don't break with shouts and thrown objects. They fracture through years of quiet differentiation. For as long as I can remember, I have been the inconvenient truth in the Vance narrative. Leo was the designated heir, the golden boy. He was groomed for the firm, celebrated at every turn. His minor achievements were headlines. His setbacks were treated as valuable life lessons. I, on the other hand, was the shadow, the creative one. When I chose to pursue an architecture degree and then moved to New York to build my own practice, they called it a selfish whim. They implied I was running away from responsibility. Leo stayed, of course. He joined the family investment firm, bought a penthouse overlooking the city, and became the perfect, predictable son. He was the plant they watered constantly. I was the hardy succulent they assumed would survive in the desert. I came home for the holidays only for my grandmother, Rose. She was the matriarch, sharp as a tack, and the only person who saw me, not a version of me. She'd always tap my hand and whisper, "You build your own foundation, child. Their castle is built on sand." This Thanksgiving was thick with a strange tension, even before Leo's announcement. My mother had that performative tightness around her mouth. My father kept making loud, meaningless pronouncements about the stock market. And Leo was overly solicitous, filling my water glass 3 times, his kindness feeling like a cruel joke. I had flown in late last night. When I walked into the study to say good morning, I saw my father quickly sliding a large legal folder into his briefcase. He jumped, startled, and then quickly said it was just an old file, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. It was the final piece of confirmation I didn't need, but desperately appreciated. The signs are always there before the explosion, but you have to be ready to read them. The conflict over this house had begun 3 months earlier, in August. The documents and the deceit. It started with a carefully worded email from my father requesting my cooperation with a routine family matter. They wanted me to sign a document relating to the refinancing of the estate. The timing was strange. They never involved me in finances. I agreed to look at the papers, but insisted on having my corporate lawyer review them in New York. The next call from my mother was laced with impatience. "Clara, darling, why complicate this? It's just paperwork. It's an easy signature for a better rate. Don't you trust your own family?" Trust, in the Vance family, was a weapon. I received the package. My lawyer, Ms. Hayes, a woman who specialized in complex estate law, spent an afternoon with the thick binder. Her call came the next morning. "Clara, this is not a refinance, not in the standard sense. Your parents have already taken out a massive undisclosed second mortgage. They're underwater. If you sign this particular addendum, you're not just co-signing a loan. You're signing away your right to contest any future liabilities tied to the property. It smells like they were trying to silently shift responsibility, hoping you'd trust the routine language, undisclosed. Second mortgage. Foreclosure notices were hinted at in the fine print. I felt the floor drop out from under me. All the years of their luxurious facade, the charity events, the perfectly manicured lawn, it was all a shell over crushing debt. I confronted my father on the phone, not with anger, but with cold, documented fact. He crumbled instantly. The excuses dissolved into a pathetic admission. They'd made a series of risky investments. The firm was taking a hit, and they needed immediate liquidity. "Clara, you're successful. You're single. You have a stable practice. We needed a collateral signature, a safety net. This estate, it's the family's entire legacy." The irony was suffocating. I was only valuable to them as a financial shield. I refused to sign. I told them I wouldn't enable their recklessness. That's when the silence began. They stopped calling, except for generic, strained texts about travel plans. But I didn't stop. I used my resources. I pulled the public property records. I saw the liens, the due dates, the terrifying interest rates. I knew the bank was already sending final warnings. The house wasn't an asset. It was a ticking financial time bomb. A month later, Leo's social media started glowing with oblique hints, photos on the deck, captions about taking over the helm and carrying the family tradition forward. They hadn't given up on offloading the debt. They had simply found their original target, the loyal son. Leo, blinded by the promise of the legacy, never would have questioned the paperwork. And so, I prepared my own documents. Not for me, but for the table. I collected the official foreclosure letters, the summary pages of the debt, the lawyer's notes, proof that the house was, in fact, worth less than the liability it carried. I wasn't planning to ruin Thanksgiving. I was planning to prevent a life-ruining trick. The folder. I drove to the estate with that folder resting in my bag, a heavy presence, a final weapon. When Leo made his announcement, when he said the deeds were being formally transferred, the timing made the entire room erupt in cheers for the family's good fortune. Leo thought he was accepting a crown. I watched the crowd, recognizing the same faces that had always dismissed me, now celebrating my exclusion. It was the perfect stage for the truth. I looked at my father, whose attempt at a celebratory sip of wine failed, his hand shaking. "Dad," I repeated, my voice now carrying across the silence. "Leo should know what he's getting before he accepts. Shouldn't he?" Leo set his glass down. "Know what, Clara? That you're bitter you didn't get an inheritance?" "No," I replied, maintaining a quiet dignity that Leo's loud bluster couldn't touch. That you're getting over $2 million in debt. They're giving you a sinking ship, Leo, and calling it a yacht. My mother finally spoke, her voice high and strained. Clara, stop this right now. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing you? I leaned forward, the anger finally cracking through the composure. Were you embarrassed when you tried to make me sign away my financial stability to cover your lies? Were you embarrassed when you packaged your mountain of debt and handed it to your favorite son as a gift? I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, placing it precisely next to my untouched plate. It was thick, heavier than an heirloom. Before you sign the final papers, Leo, look inside this. This is not a deed of transfer, it's a transfer of liability. They're months away from a foreclosure. The bank is closing in. You are not inheriting a house. You are inheriting a colossal debt you will be legally responsible for. Leo snatched the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the documents. The red-stamped letters, the lien notices, the balance sheets detailing a debt far greater than the property's actual market value. His confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, white-hot horror. Dad, is this true? What are these penalties? $2 million? You said you had a small loan. You said it was routine maintenance. My father looked down at his hands. My mother was openly weeping into her napkin, whispering, "We were going to fix it. We just needed time." My Aunt Patricia, the family's unofficial social reporter, leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Robert, you let the estate get to this state? After everything?" The murmuring started, a low, venomous tide of judgment. My father, realizing he was exposed not just to me, but to his entire critical family, finally lashed out. "Clara, you spiteful girl, you have ruined this family. You have no loyalty. You have no regard for our name." I met his gaze, my own eyes cold and steady. "No, Dad. You ruined it the day you chose silence and deceit over honesty. You ruined it the day you taught us that my independence was a punishment, and Leo's compliance was a reward. I'm not ruining the family. I'm just taking away the rug you've been sweeping the truth under." The final blow came from the least expected source. Leo's fiancée, Sarah, a smart, pragmatic woman who was utterly bewildered by the Vance family's inner workings, stood up slowly. "You told us this was a fresh start. You told Leo this house was paid for. You expected us to start our marriage in debt?" She looked at Leo, whose face was a mask of shock and betrayal. "Leo, did you even look at the numbers?" Leo couldn't answer. He just shook his head, looking like a little boy who realized he'd been abandoned in the woods. Sarah grabbed her coat and purse. "I'm not marrying into this, Leo. I won't sign on to a life built on your parents' lies." She walked out the door, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. Leo collapsed back into his chair, the folder falling from his grasp. He looked at me, not with hatred, but with a devastated clarity. "They chose me because I trusted them. I trusted the lie." "I know," I said softly. "They didn't give you a legacy, Leo. They gave you a way out for them." The reckoning and the aftermath. Just as the silence settled, heavy with the weight of Leo's devastation, a sharp, insistent ringing cut through the air. My father rushed to answer the old landline in the hallway, his steps hesitant. We all listened. "Yes, this is Robert Vance. Yes, I understand. Today? You're here now? But the holiday. Wait, please, don't do this yet." He walked back into the dining room, his face truly defeated now. He didn't have to say anything. A moment later, two men in simple professional suits stood in the doorway. One held a slim briefcase, Mr. and Mrs. Vance. "We apologize for the timing, but we're here on behalf of Coastal National Bank. We have a court order regarding the immediate placement of a lockbox on the property and a formal commencement of foreclosure proceedings." Foreclosure. The word hung in the air, cold and undeniable. My mother gasped, leaning against the sideboard. My father simply stared at the floor. The perfect, successful Vance family being officially seized by the bank in front of their entire extended family on Thanksgiving. I sat there, watching the investigators quietly set up their signs, watching my parents realize that all their careful social structure had collapsed in a single moment of my truth. My grandmother, Rose, finally spoke. She rose from her seat, her back straight and unbending. You taught them to value a roof over their heads more than the people underneath it. You deserve this fall, Robert, not them. She walked to Leo, who was still slumped over the table, and put a hand on his shoulder. I stood up, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door. My mother reached out for me, her face streaked with tears. Clara, please, you have to help us. Your practice, your funds. I shook my head. No, Mom. I am not the safety net for your reckless gambling. You lost the house the day you decided to lie to your children. Leo looked up, his eyes meeting mine. They were filled with an unexpected gratitude. Thank you, Clara. Thank you for not letting me sign it. I didn't answer. I just gave him a small, meaningful nod. He was finally seeing the foundation I had warned him about for years. I walked past the investigators, past the shocked, gossiping relatives, and out the front door. The cool Seattle air felt like a cleansing. In the weeks that followed, the estate was sold at auction. My parents were forced to downsize dramatically, moving into a small condominium far from their wealthy circle. Leo, devastated but freed from the lie, took a leave of absence from the firm to start therapy. We started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He realized he didn't hate me. He hated the role they had forced upon us both. I learned that day that sometimes the only way to save a family is to refuse to be silent about its dysfunction. The house was the symbol of their lie. By refusing to enter the silence, I tore it down, but I also laid the groundwork for a genuine connection with my brother. If you've ever had to be the truth teller at a table full of deniers, tell me where you're listening from. And after hearing my story, what would you have done differently in my shoes?